to introduce myself, I've been asked by Community Shares Wales to undertake this training session with you. These slides will be shared with you afterwards, and I'm happy to deal with any queries which arise, which we don't get a chance to discuss in the chat. I'm a community share practitioner. I've worked on 65 share offers now, collectively raising around 14.2 million, I think, is the latest across all of those share offers. And before I was a community share development practitioner, I was a
with you, and it was an extraordinary voyage of strength, if I could put it like that, because she said, "I've got to move forward with my life."
Thank you very much. Hope you do manage to move forward with your life. And before, as I was saying, before I became a community share practitioner, I was a local government press officer, but I've always been involved in campaigning organisations and working with organisations trying to bring about social change, which involves lots of activity in this kind of area. So what we'll be covering. Sorry, could everyone turn off their microphones, please, if they're not me? That would be really helpful. Thank you very much. So what we'll be covering today is essentially, I'm not going to be giving you loads of deep and abiding marketing kind of focused tricks, because every bit of my experience with the community shares sector tells me that marketing, if you consider marketing to be something you're doing at the end of the share offer, having done lots of work developing the share offer, then it's too late. And what lots of marketing actually passes for is developing the society and developing the share offer. We'll touch on how you can develop the share offer to sort of give it with marketing in mind, analysing your potential audience, creating a campaign and a campaign plan, building a brand, and then some nitty-gritty about sort of the nuts and bolts of doing a share offer itself, covering things like how long should it be live for, where should it live in terms of should you use a platform or your own website or neither, and things like that, and doing a video. But before we start all of that, it would be really good just to understand who's in the room. So could we go round and could I just get a very brief introduction from everybody, just to say who they are and what their sort of main interest in this is today. Because time is short, I've got a klaxon, which I will, if anybody starts talking for too long, then I will unfortunately have to use my klaxon and cut you off. But just to make sure we just get a basic overview of everybody who's in the room and what your sort of focus is from and what you want to get from this session. So because I can't see anybody now because I've got all my screens and doing screen sharing, if Hannah, if you could sort of bring people in, that would be really helpful, or people just come in as they see fit.
Yeah, we'll go on the list of my screens. So obviously I've done mine, Rob's done his, so we'll go to Dyfan in Community Energy Wales.
Hi there, I'm Dyfan. I work with Rob at Community Energy Wales as a communications and membership officer, and really just looking forward to hearing and seeing a different perspective on, share offers and learning today.
Thank you. And then we'll go on to David. Apologies, all I've got is David's iPad. If you want to unmute David. I can unmute for you if that's easier. Okay. We'll come back to David in a minute. We've got Elizabeth Hudson next.
Hi there. Hi. I'm a colleague of Hannah's. I work at the Wales Cooperative Centre. I've worked on lots of different projects. At the moment, I'm in market development on the Social Business Wales team. And sorry, I've got dog barking in the background. And just really interested in this, trying to learn more. And I have marketing experience as well, so it's just trying to work out how those things fit together and where I can help in the future.
Brilliant, thanks Elizabeth. Justin Walters. If you'd like to unmute, Justin.
Hi Hannah. I don't know whether you can see them on screen now.
That's okay, if you just want to tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Justin. I'm the chair of the White Hart Community Inn in St Ogmos, Pembrokeshire. We have an open share offer at the moment. We've just secured our 500th shareholder, which has allowed us to buy our local community pub. And we're in the process of now doing the repairs and getting it open. My interest today is to understand how we can continue to market the share offer, having in the fact that we've achieved our first significant milestone in buying the pub. So obviously we want to keep the share offer open so that we can generate further funding investment. So that's my interest today. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Justin. Next is Callum Taylor.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm up in York, and I'm a local councillor for my area of York, and I'm supporting a campaign to buy and run a pub that's long been derelict, and as part of that we'll need a good community share offer. We've got one or two really keen people who are really getting to grips with the ins and outs, but I'm off work today, so I thought I'll try and learn a bit to try and help share the load too.
Brilliant, thanks for joining us. Next we've got Lindsay.
Hello, is my mic working? Yes.
Yeah,
sorry, old headphones. I work for Cymru Creations. We are a film studio. We're looking at expanding the buildings we are based in. We usually use grants, so I'm learning a bit more about this today.
Brilliant, welcome. Next we have Gordina Appleton.
Hello, my name's Gordina Appleton. I'm on the board of directors for our community shop and post office. We are looking to build a new shop and post office, and to do that we're looking for community shares and want to know how best to go about that. So hopefully I can learn a lot today. Thank you.
Brilliant, welcome. Next we've got Maggie Joan.
Good morning. I've put a link to our project in the chat box. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm getting a double feedback here. I own semi-derelict property in Llanfechen that I bought 20 years ago with the intention of making it into a walkers and cyclists hostel. In the intervening period, life has got in the way and there's been a lot of problems. So I still own this property that is even more derelict. And when I bought it, it was because it was such an important property for the centre of the village, which is dead. So we got the planning permission for the Walkers and Cyclists Hostel many years ago, and then the funding, Objective 1 funding, some people may be familiar with. It took so long to get the planning permission, but that by the time we did get the planning permission, the Objective 1 funding had disappeared. And it was a bit downhill from there because there was no support from the local councillors. So I really want to get the community more involved, and yeah, that's the story. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Maggie. Next we've got Nadia.
Hi everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, great. So I'm also part of a community pub group, and it sounds as though we're in a similar stage to, I think it was Callum from York. We're in County Durham. We have just begun working with Plunkett Foundation, which is how I found out about this session. Obviously, one of the things that potentially we're working towards is launching a share offer in order to purchase the pub. So really just coming along to learn, because it's not an area that I have any previous knowledge about. So really looking forward to the session.
Thank you. Next we've got Nick. Nick Small.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit echoey, but you're all right.
I'll bring it a bit closer. I've got you on my iPad. Hi everyone, I'm Nick Small. I run an organisation called Social Impact Consulting. I've been working with on two community share offices at the moment. One is with an organisation called Embar Foundation. You'll be working with Wales Cooperative Centre on that, which is an iconic building in Shotton in North Wales, the old Shotton Steelworks site, which we're looking to bring into community use and have a community share off.
Oh, Nick, I think we've lost you.
No, that's me. I've finished.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, thanks, Nick. And then we had a late joiner of, apologies if I say your name wrong, Aviona.
Yeah, hi. Nah, man, it's perfect pronunciation. Sorry, really, Wi-Fi up and down here. I'm really sorry, and it's quite early for me these days. I'm Aviona. I work at the University of Bangor. I lecture on sustainable communities, sustainability, and I've been sort of working with several groups. I'm involved with a group called Cegin and Cymuned in Porthmadog, and we run a small grant scheme. But I'm interested in actually learning about this process so I can understand the different community social enterprises that are popping up and getting stronger across all of Wales, so I can incorporate that into my teaching for students who are interested in social entrepreneurship within geography and rural development.
Brilliant, thank you. And we'll try one more time in case you can mute, and we'll go back to David. David, do you want to say a little bit?
I will if you can now hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
That's splendid. Okay, my apologies for earlier. I'm David Sturgis, and I'm the secretary of the Brentnell Community Shop here in Somerset. We've been working for just over a year now with the Plunkett Foundation. We opened, or rather took over, the closed village shop here as COVID hit. We're a community benefit society, and it means that we have to have our first annual members meeting by the end of July, and that gave us a deadline to get our community share issue launched and underway, and that's exactly where we are at the moment. So I'm obviously right in the middle of the community share issue process, and so I'm here to try and learn whatever I can.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's everybody, Dave.
Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful to me. I hope we can cover off everybody's concerns. Some of them seem a tiny bit niche. I'm looking at the open share offer, which is almost an entirely different way of looking at share capital. Hopefully we will touch on some things which will give you some useful food for thought today, but open share offers are kind of a very niche thing, and moving on to sort of second and third stage share issues does involve a degree of specialized thinking. So this is very much tailored towards people undertaking their first share offer, but there will hopefully be some reads across. So first thing to say is, when should you start marketing your share offer? I very much subscribe to the theory of from Australian politics that you can't fatten a pig on market day, which is to say, if you're thinking about marketing your share offer at the time you're about to launch it, it is too late. Because the real work of marketing a share offer is undertaken in the days, weeks, months, and in some cases years leading up to the share offer. Because the actual share offer part of this is essentially all about conversion rather than recruitment. And by that I mean the share offer period, when you say, right, come and buy shares, everybody, that's a point where you get people who've already almost mentally decided to become shareholders and members to actually become shareholders and members. The point where you move people who've never heard of you and have never heard of your share offer into being share offer subscribers and members of your society over the course of a 1, 2, 3 month long share offer is generally not enough time, because the biggest success factor, as I say there, is the alignment of people between your outcomes and your goals. And it's engaging with those people to move them up a ladder of engagement, which starts with awareness of what you're doing, interested in what you're doing, interacting with what you're doing, engaging with you, and finally investing. Now, these rungs, people can jump them quite quickly. And one of the big factors here is what we call salience, which is to say, how much do people already know and care about the issue? The more salient they think the issue is, the project you're looking to develop in your community, the easier you're going to have a time of moving them up this ladder of engagement. People are interested in what they're interested in, and if they're not interested in what you're offering, you've got a massive challenge to persuade them, because it's not just about saying, hey, that thing you're interested in, we're interested in something which is going to help that problem. So let's take the community pub. If you really care about your community having a space within it where people can meet, commune, drink, have parties, celebrate, and you think that's important, then you've got a really salient proposition for those people. If you're a teetotaler who's never been in a pub and has only just moved to the local area, it's not just about persuading them that your pub project is important. It's about any pub project is important. It's so you've got to, that time it takes to bring people to where you are from where they are is a challenge, and you can't do that very quickly. People tend not to turn their minds around very quickly. It needs sedimentary layering. It needs kind of repeating and repeating, and in the way that, say, sediment gets dropped off in a stream over time, with every bit of water which passes over it, there's small grains, and over time that builds up and silts up. And it's quite similar with the community share offer in terms of engaging people and getting them into a position. We need to get them to the point where they see your project and want it to happen so much that they want to become members and owners. It's very unlikely from a standing start that lots of people are moving around in your community thinking, if only there was a community business I could own, life would be cushy. So, but we need to get them into the position where they not only want to own the community business, they're excited to give you £500 and more in many cases to make it happen. So they've started to see that what you're proposing and what your solution to this proposal is essentially is the perfect solution to the problem which they've identified. And you know, they might not even see that there is a problem, let alone that your solution is the solution, and that in order to make the solution happen involves investing in the share offer. So you've got to sort of understand that people are where they are. Now, some projects have a much easier time of this, because let's say you're in this pub. I'm going to be using the pub as an analogy because it is the perfect community share offer, and it's the most, it wins the modal average in this particular segment of people participating in this call. But if your pub has been closed and it's been a subject of planning concern, and people have been wondering what's going to happen to the pub, is it going to reopen, is it not, we're really concerned about it, the kind of normal warp and weft of village life is doing the work of persuading people that your share offer is salient. You don't have to do much. People are doing it themselves. They're identifying that the pub is important to village life, and they're wondering, will somebody do something about it to make it good again? And here, coming in from stage left, are the superheroes who've got this community share issue which will solve this problem. If you've not got that salient issue, though, where your problem is actually getting people to see that there's a problem, then that's a whole different kettle of fish. So you need to understand about how popular, salient your solution is to the problem that people are going to be involved, asked to sort of to solve by investing. You know, and it's when you're engaging with people, one of the key things is to listen to them. Don't just say to them, we've got a problem, there is a problem in our community and we have a solution and you just need to get on board. It's much more subtle than that. You've got to actually engage with them to the extent that they start to, you're interested in their take on the problem. Maybe they don't see the problem in the way you do. And one model of a community share issue is to make everyone think like you and then they invest. It doesn't really work. You tend to need military power behind you and the threat of death to make people actually start to agree with you. Generally, it's about building a consensus, understanding that people might have subtly different takes on what the problem facing your community is, and that new information you receive from those conversations enables you to maybe frame what you're doing in terms of your share offer in a subtly different way, but it's an important way which enables people to actually start to see that your problem is their problem. And once you've got that, you're moving a hell of a long way in the right direction. it's really important when you're engaging with people that you set a lead, but don't look too driven. If it looks like you're a small bunch of people who've come up with a solution to a problem people might have perceived, that's great. Some people will be really happy you've done the heavy lifting and you've done the hard yards of coming up with a solution. But it could look quite easily like you just want to recruit people to your army, and you've got there's no degree of consultation involved about what the solution is. So it's about trying to make sure that people feel involved, because critically, if they own the idea, they're more likely to own the business which is going to put in place to instantiate the idea. So if you're too consultative and you organize a meeting in your community and you say, hey, what does everybody think? Then basically there will be quite a few people who will run away from that process, because they'll be like, I don't want to sit here and have endless conversations. I want to see people with a bit of drive, but not so much drive that it looks like you've got all the solutions worked out and the other people can just withdraw. You seem to have got this. You seem to have done all the thinking. You've done all the talking. There's clearly no place for us in these plans, so we'll just retreat to a safe distance. That's the worst outcome you want, because it means that people have engaged to the extent that they've defected out of wanting to be a supporter of what you're doing. Now, in terms of there is a dynamic relationship between the elements of your share offer and how marketable it will be as a proposition. And often groups do a lot of work developing their share issue. Then they come to think about, so who's the audience for this? And they've set in stone some pretty important things, which is very difficult to unpick. So when you're developing the share offer, you need to sort of think about the iterative nature of it. You start, you test, what does that look like in terms of our potential audience, and go back if you think actually it's a bit weak. These are things like interest rates and withdrawal. Now, many investors, survey after survey demonstrates that the majority of investors in share offers don't really care about the financial returns they're going to get from them. However, the people who do tend to be the heavy lifters. So, you know, the kind of normal 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule, it's sometimes called, where you get 80% of the money comes from 20% of the investors, and 80% of the investors give you 20% of the money. It can vary in community share issues, but broadly that same dynamic is at work. And the people who care most about interest rates and withdrawals and withdrawal horizons are the people who are going to be investing 80% of your money. And so whilst numerically most people won't care that much, the people who do care are important to you achieving your success. The minimum investment target is important because what you're trying to do is get that as low as possible and as achievable as possible. So have you really thought about every grant you could possibly get? Have you looked at getting some debt finance? Many groups don't want to touch debt because it makes them nervous, but debt is not only brilliant because it reduces the amount you need from your equity share issue, it also gives confidence to investors that a financial institution has thought, yeah, this looks good, we could do this. I just realised I think Zoom might have dropped off on my computer, so do tell me if that's the case, Hannah. I'll keep on talking, but hopefully I can bring back the presentation. And Hannah, if you could maybe load up.
Sorry.
You can still see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It just says Zoom is connecting on my computer, so it might not advance. Anyway, minimum investment is important per investor. We know that around 60% of investors. Sorry, what was that, Hannah?
It's just come off the presentation now.
Yeah. I don't know if it might be worth you putting on your, if you could share the slides, because you probably have more reliable broadband, and then I could just ask you to advance them.
I'll just try and get it up now.
Apologies for. When I said that, I'll carry on talking about the minimum investment. This is really crucial because we know about 60% of investors in a share offer will invest the minimum they are allowed. In other words, setting the minimum gives them the people the permission to be as stingy as you are allowing them. So if you say, we want to make this as affordable for everybody as much as humanly possible, that's great, but it will mean that lots of people who could quite happily invest more will be given permission to invest as little as you're making it available. So that's one of the things to think through, and you can maybe use things like rewards to stretch people, but it is one of the big issues which a group will spend an inordinate amount of time debating, because it's one of those areas where actually the values of the organisation are embodied through the decision for things like how much is it going to cost to become a participant and a member in what we're about to do. If we could get to the 4th slide, Hannah, that would be brilliant.
It seems to be playing up for me as well. Bear with me 2 seconds. Let me just... It won't let me... Oh, there we go. Apologies, everybody. It wasn't downloading. I'm just trying to do it again.
Okay. In general, there's like, if people aren't familiar with the metaphor of the Mobius strip, which is where you start on one side and you end up on the other side. That's quite a useful metaphor to have in mind when you're developing your share issue. You start off thinking about developing the share issue, and that's going to be driven by the fundamentals of the business. But the more you start developing it, the more you realize that maybe actually we need to think about how this is going to impact on our investability, on the proposition we're going to be engaged in and offering to people afterwards. Things about related to this, you've got the issue of genuine social outcomes. So, you know, if you've got a pub and your offer is essentially, we are going to be offering you the opportunity to buy a pub. That's going to be great, but it appeals to people who like pubs. And if you've not got enough people in your community who like pubs to get you to your minimum investment target, then you need to think about making this project work for people who maybe don't like pubs so much. So you start talking more about the social impact of the actual share offer. You start talking about all the touch points it will make in terms of addressing social isolation and so on and so forth. But obviously you can't stretch it to make it something it's not. If the people running this project don't care that much about all those things, then there is a danger if you start to stress that you could offer social benefits to a group of people who in reality you're not that interested in offering benefits to them. So it has to be about thinking about what can we genuinely and what can we honestly and authentically offer to people in addition to the core proposition of maybe the pub drinkers. Hannah, is there any movement at your end, unfortunately?
Trying, Dave.
No problems.
You should be stuck on this screen.
Okay.
Was it the website?
There we go.
Brilliant.
Which one are we on?
So if we could,
that one.
If we could get next one, please. So one of the things to think about is no, sorry, the previous one, Hannah, sorry, that's the one. Yeah, thank you very much. So one of the things to think about here is how much your share offer is what we call an investment offer or an ownership offer. Investment offers have very strong financial projections. Energy offers are the classic in this particular instance. Energy offers generally have a guaranteed, or pretty much, you know, as long as the sun carries on shining, we have a relatively guaranteed investment proposition. You invest X, we will be able to pay X amount of interest and we can fund withdrawal over Y number of years. And it's very sellable on that basis. Other projects might have much more sort of nuanced financial returns. Many pub projects, for example, will simply say, we have the ability to offer to give you returns. We have the ability to pay withdrawals, but we're not 100% sure at this particular stage how much there will be. So just think about your share offer and map it against this. If your share offer offers no financial returns to investors or has no real sort of a promise or prospect of it, then give yourself a 0. If it's got some 1, and if it's got a proper, solid, thought-through financial proposition, give it a 2. And then also thinking about the financial returns of the share offer. The social returns, the social benefits. If it's not got much of a social benefit because it's actually a business proposition, give it a 0. 1 if it's got some, 2 if it's absolutely loaded with them. And just plot, where does the offer you're developing leave you on this. If it puts you, if you've got 2 on both, your offer is going to be really, really, it's not easy to market, but much easier than one getting a 1 or a, you know, getting an orange square or a pink square. It just gives you an idea of whether you maybe want to think about, can you do better than where it is at the moment? So Hannah, can we get the next slide, please?
Can you see that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is one of the sort of little rules of thumb you can use. Not everyone will invest in your audience, but what we're trying to, because it's good to work out at any particular stage. So you think about your minimum target, which, you know, maybe £150,000, 250,000 we've got as an example here. Divide that by 400, because 400 is the average investment in community shares, which we've seen from survey data from the Community Shares Unit, who've done a couple of surveys over the last 5 to 6 years, and it comes back at around 400. That varies from sector to sector. Community energy is more like 1,000, but in general, across all share offers, it's about 400. And then divide that by the number of people in your core audience, the people who you absolutely know this is for you. So if you're doing, we've got an example here of a pub, you need 250,000, you divide it by 400, and you've got 2,000 people in your community who you know really should be concerned about this. And we work out the percentage, so we need 31% of our audience to invest. So you can do these rough sort of calculations for yourself. Next slide, Hannah, please. What does the number tell you? If it's under 2%, then you are looking very strong. It's looking great. I wouldn't say it's going to be easy, but it's going to be, you know, you shouldn't need to sweat too much. It's looking pretty darn good. 5% still looking very good. 10%, 1 in 10 of the people in your community investing, that's positive. That's generally where most share offers sort of play around in the 5 to 10% mark. If it's at 20%, then we really need everyone to invest. And I'm using the word defect here to mean do something we don't want them to do, which is to say not invest. If you're at 50%, you need utterly solid support. Pretty much everybody in your community needs to get on board with this, because many people invest as households. So you've got your population, and then most families will say, how much are we going to invest? And the named investor is investing on behalf of everybody in that household. So you've pretty much got no room for anybody to duck out. It's important to sort of note that you can change the dynamics of this formula. You might score a higher than average, so you might have more than 400 as your average investment if your community is pretty wealthy, or if it's got a strong investment proposition, if it's what we'd call an investment proposition rather than an ownership proposition. But if your community's wealth is pretty fixed, there's not much you can do in the short term to change how wealthy your community of potential investors actually is. So you need to grow the community. You need to grow the bottom number. And that's where the marketing and engagement can come in. And if your community size is constrained, if you're opening a pub and you've got a village of 5,000 people, and people who don't live in your community don't care about your pub because they've got their own pubs to care about, then you need to grow the average investment or consider lowering the maximum. You know, getting some extra support from grants, maybe think about Public Works Loan Board or something like that. And if you can't lower the average, so you can't lower the maximum, and you can't raise the average to beyond 400, and you can't grow the size of the core investor base because it's a pub in a community and we can't make people outside care about it, then you need to do some really, really hard thinking, because those are the 3 elements you've got the ability to move around with and play with and maybe improve your circumstances. And if you can't really do much on any of them because they're all pretty fixed, then you're going to have to do a lot of work. And you know, you just need to be wide-eyed and clear that that's what's going to happen. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the critical thing here, and this is probably, I think, the most important slide in this whole session, what you need to do is segment and identify who are the people who are going to invest in this share offer and why. So you should think about, you should do it, this is perfect for brainstorming as a committee or as a wider group of people who are volunteering. And you should identify for your share offer, who are the potential people who could be as a sort of segment of people who are different from other people, who would be interested in your share offer. This isn't about coming up with a list of like, well, there are people who, anybody in the world could potentially be included in that. So you've got to be realistic. Who are the people who we can reasonably make a good argument as to why this matters to them or should matter to them? But it needs to be very clear-eyed and realistic. And crucially, until you've got number 10 in there, these people don't exist. You could have a great connection with a bunch of people, but if you can't actually get into that group of people, then it's going to be very difficult. So thinking about all of this, you've got to think, how many people are in this group? And are they people who should invest, or people who probably should invest, or people who could? Let's use our community pub. The people who should invest, the people who live directly, for whom the pub is the nearest place where they can socialise and meet and commune with other people in their community. People who probably should invest, maybe people a bit further out for whom there are other pubs close by, but that everybody, this pub has long been used from people from these other communities. And people who could invest, maybe they're people who don't live necessarily so locally, but they've got an interest in things like craft beer or real ale or something like that, where you can make a strong argument that they, if the things we understand you say matter to you, do matter to you, then what we're doing should matter to you. So think about what impact will it have on their lives directly. Again, our pub, will they be able to go to a pub without having to drive 5 miles to the next pub nearest to where the village is? Will it have an impact on their community? It might be in addition to the direct impact it has on them, or it might be instead of might not be a massively palpable direct impact on their life individually, but it will have a massive tangible effect on their community. And their community here could be geographic, or it could be a community of interest. It just needs to be the community which you are calling into existence with your share offer. What aspects of the share offer will these people be most interested in? Not everyone is as interested in every aspect of the share offer as other people, and understanding what parts of the share offer might particularly appeal to a particular group of people is going to be really helpful when it comes to doing our campaign plan. What elements are they less interested in? Are they less interested in them, or would they be actively negative about them? And we should kind of downplay those elements when we're speaking to those groups, because we don't want to sort of set a hair running with them. And crucially, what unites the people in this group? Is it their values? Do they share various things? Or is it their location, where they live? Is it some activity they participate in? Are they members of a sports club? Or maybe they're fans of a particular football team, and it's the activity of being a football fan more than the location which actually unites all the people in this group. You can also go deeper. You can think about, what are the hopes and fears of people in these groups? And how can we how can we address their fears and feed their hopes with what we're doing? And things like, who do people who are in this group respect? What kind of newspaper do they read? What brands do they like? What TV shows do they watch? Who's a person who these people tend to respect quite a lot? A word of warning, though, not only do you need to be realistic, you need to have in mind as well that every one of the people we are thinking about to go into these groups, ultimately, we're doing this because we want them to become a member. And there is a trade-off. You want your share offer to succeed, absolutely. But also you want your share offer to end up with a membership pool of your society who are actually genuinely interested for the long haul and for the long term. So you might get lots of people who are maybe tangentially connected to your particular community, and you think, brilliant, we got lots of money from them, and you've bought the pub and it's now yours. But now you've got a bunch of people who own the pub who are necessarily not as connected to the community as other people. And that's going to create tensions in the future, which will be hard to navigate and manage. So, there is a double-edged sword, being careful for what you wish for when it comes to having people in your community who end up becoming investors. So don't just sort of throw in everybody you can think of. Start from that, but then winnow it down. That's the crucial thing. Winnow it down into practical steps you can take for people who you think should invest, could invest, and you'd like them to invest, as opposed to people who maybe they could invest but you're not so sure that you'd really want them if it wasn't for the fact that you're desperate for the cash. Could you get the next slide, please, Hannah? So this is a critical thing. The majority of investors seem to be drawn from a distinct subset of the population. So if a community share offer was a person, she'd be in her early 60s, she'd have a university education, she'd own her own home, and she'd be retired with an annual income from her pension that keeps them comfortable, i.e. at average earnings. So people who are wealthy enough to have pensions which are as much as the average earnings. Now, obviously there are lots of people outside of this bracket, but an awful lot of people inside community share offer investor pools are drawn from exactly this subset of people. So, 73% of them have degrees, but they're drawn from an age cohort where that was something what about 1 in 10 people had. So there's massive overrepresentation of people with higher education in community share investments. That's also a function of, for a long time, people in that cohort, if you had a university education, you tend to be drawn from a slightly wealthy, you tend to get jobs which paid better and enabled you to build wealth. And give you capital to actually invest. So one of the things which affects this is lots of people younger than that don't have spare capital, they don't have savings, they don't have pensions. So their ability to invest or invest significantly is massively affected by their own personal circumstances. So whilst lots of people don't invest out of the, this is probably about half of investors, maybe a third to a half, depending on the share issue. That's an enormously large proportion of your share issues, heavy lifting, the 80% of money coming from 20% of the people. A lot of those people are going to be drawn from this elderly, educated, home-owning sector. So if that doesn't look like the community of people you're going to be building your share offer to support, then it's not the end of the world, but you need to have a really clear plan about how are you going to get the people who aren't as able to invest in share issues to invest in this particular share issue. What's your plan to grow the community? You're probably going to have a lower average because you don't have as many of these people to draw upon. And how are you going to then grow this community to make it salient to a much wider group, because your average is going to be lower, therefore your pool of potential investors needs to be higher. It's not the end of the world if you don't have lots of people who look like this retired graduate, but it is a lot easier if you can identify that your community does have a reasonably large subset of people who match these characteristics. So next slide, please, Hannah. Just to say, I'm going to be at the end of this section. I'm going to be doing a comfort break in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum. So if that's something you are holding on for, then if you want to hold on, then absolutely great. But if not, then just law of 2 feet and all of that. So a campaign plan is absolutely crucial. It's lots of groups surprisingly get to the stage of doing the share offer, and their campaign plan looks like we're having a launch event, and then we'll do a bit of leafleting, and then we'll do some tweeting, and that's about it. And that might be absolutely fine for a particular share offer, but it seems to me to be a little ad hoc and not as helpful. So the critical thing is to develop, I would suggest, is a campaign plan where you go through for the time your share offer is open, and indeed the run up to the share offer, and you have timed and specific actions allocated to specific people. In a nutshell, who will be doing what to communicate with whom, to what end, using what story. And you can break down all the elements of that sentence. The critical thing is that every action is assigned. If it's not got an assigned person to actually do it, it won't get done, and therefore doesn't actually exist as an action. Assigned targets, actions which don't have assigned targets, will just see scattergun activity. What's your plan today? We're going to do some stuff. We're going to tweet. Who to? Everybody. To what end? Hopefully some people will invest. you can do that, but it's much better if you're thinking, we've done through our segment, so we've got people who live in the village. How are we going to contact them? We're going to do a launch event on the village green. We're going to get everybody in the open air and get everybody sort of mingling again after the lockdown, and then we're going to put smiles on their faces, and that's how we're going to attack them. But we're going to also go to the camera people the week later, because we're going to get some early money on the doors, which is going to show momentum in our share offer, and then we're going to go to people outside the wider community who maybe need a little bit more certainty that this is going to happen before they start to invest. In the third week, maybe we go to people who used to live in the village. We're going to use Facebook and those sort of networks, and we're going to use our existing network of people who've invested and who live in the community to contact family members who no longer live in the community but think well of the good times they used to have in the pub. It's the place they first got drunk, and all those kind of ways in which the story of the pub is wrapped around their own identity and their own understanding of themselves. But we don't want those people early doors, because these people, need to see that the local community who still live there are really on side. So we go to them in the third week. And then maybe in the fourth week, it's all hands to the pump. We're just pulling every lever we can to make sure that this actually happens. Crucially, you need to be honest about the resources, and that's specifically about human resources, the people to actually do this. There are no second chances, and if you've got a share offer and it's open for 4 weeks, and you've got somebody who's going to do a really important part of it on the Monday of week 2, and that person actually turns out they're a bit busier than they thought they were going to be, but they didn't mention it to you, that's a problem, and it's a massive problem for the share offer, because there is no other Monday in our second week of our share issue. And so the whole strategy can fall apart. So when you're asking people to volunteer or assigning roles, it's really important that everybody's honest about how much time they will actually be able to devote to this, as opposed to how much time they'd like to be able to devote to it, but they don't quite know. Honesty is much more important, because that gives you accuracy, and accuracy is much more important than wishful thinking. And as I say there, assign people for every action and backups, because if somebody turns out that their child is ill on that first Monday of the second week of the share offer, and they can't do the thing they were going to do because they've got to look after their child, then you've got a backup person who can actually do that role. And then you put all of this, next slide please, Hannah. You put all of this in a campaign plan. You can have the one at the back there is for a week, and the one at the front is for a day. You can do it you don't have to do it in that fine-grained detail. You could just maybe have one for a month, and you have one for each month of the campaign, and you have another one for the week of the campaign. But it just helps you break down about how much time are you giving to the segments. You might have identified that actually nobody really cares that much about your projects outside of the immediate vicinity of the community, and that's where your focus should be. And if you do your campaign plan and it turns out you're doing an awful lot of tweeting to people around and about, then is that the best use of your focus? Or if conversely you've identified that there aren't enough people in your local community to get this over the line, and you're going to need some people who've got a much more sort of tangential relationship to the project to come on board as well, and you're not doing much to get those people, then again the campaign plan can help you identify, are you giving your focus to the people you need to give it to? Are you targeting the investor segments you really need to hit? Or are you focusing too much on people who aren't as important to you getting over the finish line? It also helps you break down if you're leaning on too many people. You might have people who, this might be developed over the course of weeks, and the same people keep volunteering for things, and everybody's like, oh, brilliant, I'm glad they volunteered, means I don't have to. But when you put it on the campaign plan, you realize that 2 or 3 people are doing an awful lot of work, and that makes you vulnerable to those people being ill or being otherwise engaged or having to self-isolate or whatever next year's particular horror story, which is going to impact on all our lives, will be. So that helps you sort of make sure and you can level with those people and say, you're being asked to do an awful lot of work. Are you up for it? Is that fair? And they can either go absolutely, totally on board, or absolutely not. Let's re-divvy these things out. It's also good to vary personnel anyway. It helps keep messages fresh. Even if it's the same message being given, but if it's being given by a different face, then that's going to be helpful, because it means people can't tune out. If they see the same people saying the same things over and over again, they start to tune out at the second, third, fourth time they hear it, because they think, I've heard this all before. So whilst you're going to be keeping your message fresh, keep the people who are delivering your message fresh too. So people immediately like, oh, I've not seen this person before. That's a new voice I've heard. It also helps prevent over-identification of your share offer with a small number of people. If you're, that can sometimes be helpful, but that person who you're going to be identified with needs to be someone who, if your village could make a king, they would choose that person. Most people, though, tend to have people who don't like them so much. Maybe they think they're a bit of a busybody. Maybe they think they're always volunteering for things. And how do they have the time? There must be something weird going on in their life if they're doing all of this. If that person is the person you're identifying your campaign with, then people who think negatively about that person will think negatively about your share offer. So vary it up so you don't allow people to become focal points for and lightning rods for the share offer, or bring what, the lightning rod mentality they have in the world into your share offer. And as I say, varying it keeps it all fresh. Play to people's strengths. Don't put square pegs in round holes. There'll be some people who are introverted, who the idea of speaking in front of the media or a public meeting literally will make them cry and dissolve as a human being. But they love to go and deliver leaflets through everybody's doors. Give them that job then, rather than giving them a job which they're not suited for. If people sometimes want to volunteer and sort of get an opportunity to do things which they wouldn't otherwise do, maybe their boss thinks they're an idiot, but they know that they're more than their boss thinks they are, and they want to prove that they can do more things than they've ever done. Brilliant. Personal growth through share offers is fantastic, but be clear that you're not setting people up to fail, and that you think they genuinely have the ability to do this and aren't kind of going to make it a massive problem for themselves, because they're going to be humiliated when they can't speak in front of the public meeting, and that's also going to detract from your campaign. And finally, when it comes to the campaign planning, manage tensions. A share offer campaign will get stressful, and that will surface antagonisms which may have been present in your group as you've been building the share offer and developing the campaign and developing the whole project. And some of those tensions you've batted away, and you've sort of forced down, and you've thought, let's just all play nice. When it gets to the third week of your share offer campaign and it seems like you're stuck at 43%, and no matter what you're doing doesn't seem to be working, that's when those tensions will surface. People will start saying, I told you so. I told you the camera people were never going to come along and back our share offer. Or I told you we shouldn't have used X because everyone thinks X is a bit of a gob, or whatever. All of these tensions will come out. Putting a plan in place means you're less likely to be pulled off course and gives you a core to argue around. So arguing about whether the weekly focus is correct is more self-contained and a more kind of constructive debate than whether the entire strategy was a complete disaster and should never have been happened because somebody was too dominant in meetings and didn't let anybody else get a word in edgeways. Obviously, it's better to have meetings which don't get run like that, but manage the tensions throughout the campaign and the planning phase to make sure that you're minimizing the tensions which will come out. But you will probably have rows, and you will probably have kiss and makeups throughout the share offer period. It tends to be a law of nature in these kinds of things. I'm going to stop there for a 5-minute comfort break. And when we come back, we'll pick up some questions which have come out of that first session, or if anything strikes you, put it in the chat. We'll have a quick wrap up of questions at the start of the next part of this, and then we'll crack on and we'll move quickly into an exercise where we'll be using breakouts to give you something to actually get your teeth into. So thanks very much, and see you in about 5 minutes.